Today is the best time to ever be living here on Earth. Climate change is inevitable. Nuclear war is always a potential threat with leaders like Trump and Kim Jong-un involved. Heck, we're living in a pandemic right now. The novel coronavirus. Plus, an asteroid is coming soon on our way. Don't worry, it won't hit us. But there are a lot of threats that can wipe our species off the planet of Earth. We need to think of a solution quick. Hey, but thank God there is a solution. Elon Musk has already thought of it. A multi-planetary system.
That's what we want.
There are two paths that humans can go down. Either we face some eventual extinction event that wipes off our whole species, or we can be more flexible and become a multiplanetary species, developing independent settlements in these different planets, especially Mars. It's important to ask ourselves ethical questions about, are we allowed to do this? However, for the purpose of this video, we'll be focusing on whether we can do this technically and what are some technical barriers to achieving this system. In our status quo, SpaceX, NASA, and ESA are looking into engines that can last us the 333.21 kilometers that takes us from Earth to Mars. However, we're missing a key component. Very minimal research has been done about reproductive health. Let's see what happens if we continue this trend of not researching reproductive health. Action! 3, 2, 1. The first 4 people arrive at Mars at a cost of $6 billion US. This includes hardware, operational expenditures, plus the margins. And assuming with the ability to get to Mars, you have the ability to adapt to the environment via incubators that protect you from radiation or some type of food source. But in order to increase your population, you're going to have to send rockets with populations from Earth to Mars or these different planets. There are 2 main problems to this. That one, you get an aging population when you don't send people to Mars, but if you do send people to Mars, it's extremely costly. Mars One estimated that the cost to send the first 5 people to Mars would be $6 billion US. Although price would decrease over time, that's still a long way to go, and the price would still be fairly significant. And let's say there's some great catastrophe and no one is left on Earth. Then your colony dies off, since it's reliant on Earth. There's a better way to increase population. What does humans do best? Reproduce. But how? These planets definitely have different radiation and gravity levels. What are some of the biological complications for the fetus and mother while in a completely different environmental state? To come up with a solution, we first need to know what the problem is. And right now we have very little research done about what even is the problem. Here's how we might approach this dilemma. We can have a path of questions that could guide our research. First, what are some of the environmental changes from Earth to other planets? And as for Mars, we know that it has no magnetosphere, which means that there is more radiation that it's prone to, but also it has a smaller mass than Earth, meaning that its gravity is weaker. And so from these 2 facts, we know that there's more radiation and there's a weaker gravity. So there are many different environmental changes out there, and with these factors, we can ask ourselves, what does this really mean for the human body? But specifically, what does this mean for fetal health? And so this leads us to a different question about what influences fetal health. So when we know what makes a fetus healthy and the different environmental changes, we can further research how does this X environmental change influence something that requires for the fetus to be healthy. And so that's the research that I'm doing right now. I'm writing a proposal for the Possum 13 challenge. I want to see how this different gravity environment would influence the blood flow of the umbilical artery. But to understand this, we need some background context. The umbilical cord is a lifeline for the baby, since it supplements nutrients. It carries oxygen and nutrients from the placenta into your baby's bloodstream, from its veins carrying oxygen-rich blood, and its arteries that return deoxygenated blood and waste from the fetus back into the placenta. Any disruption in the blood flow through the umbilical cord can cause great damage to the fetus, since it is its lifeline after all. And we can actually measure this blood flow through a Doppler ultrasound. So when you're performing this ultrasound, this type of graph would show up on your monitor. And so there is a highest point and also a lowest point. The highest point is represented with the letter S, and it's the peak system velocity of the umbilical artery, which is just the max velocity when the fetal heart contracts. And the letter D represents the end diastolic velocity, which is just during the relaxation period of the fetus heart. And there are different graphs that represent the health of the fetus. But essentially, you want your graph to look like this. That means that the heart has elasticity and the placenta is doing well. Here's what we propose. A zero-G plane flies in a parabolic trajectory where it simulates microgravity at this exact time for 20 seconds. Inside of the plane is a house mouse, where it's in its gestation period, but also there's some ultrasound equipment that includes a transducer the size of a bar of a soap, and a phone that wirelessly connects to that transducer to display the Doppler graph. We're able to use the ultrasound equipment to get a collection of graphs that show the velocity of blood flow in different gravity environments, in 1G, in 1.5 to 1.7G, and in 0G. This is data for us to make conclusions about what the immediate effects of gravity are on the velocity of blood flow of the umbilical artery of this pregnant mouse. But also, we can make predictions of how healthy the fetus would be long term. Right now, we're missing funding for research and research itself to know about how these different environmental changes influence fetal health. What about radiation? And what about different temperatures? We know that Mars is colder than Earth. But moreover, what about different food sources that we come up, creative food sources that we come up with about how we can sustain life on Mars? But even crazier, how do all these different environmental changes act together to impact fetal health? There's a lot more research to be done, and if we were to pursue this research, we would be one step closer to developing solutions to problems that we might face to develop a sustainable multiplanetary system.